The last thing I heard before my mother's van disappeared around the bend was my brother laughing. Not a nervous laugh, not an okay, joke's over laugh, a real one, the kind that comes from the stomach, the kind you can't fake. And underneath it, I heard my sister-in-law say, loud enough that the wind carried it back to me, $20 says she calls crying within the hour. I was standing alone at a rest stop off Highway 17, somewhere between Sudbury and Parry Sound, Ontario. It was early October. The kind of October that reminds you summer was never real. Gray sky pressing down low, wind off the shield cutting right through your hoodie, the smell of pine and cold pavement and something faintly like diesel. There were 2 other cars in the lot. Neither of them belonged to anyone I knew. I had no phone. My mother had asked to borrow it 2 hours earlier to check the map because hers was dying. She still had it. I had no wallet. I'd left it in my bag in the van because we were only stopping for 5 minutes. I had 43 cents in my jacket pocket, I know because I counted. Twice. I want to tell you that I saw it coming, that some part of me, some older, wiser version of myself that knew better, had been suspicious when my brother suggested this road trip in the first place, but I didn't. I genuinely didn't. I was 28 years old and I still believed, somewhere deep and embarrassingly hopeful, that my family was capable of basic human decency. That afternoon taught me otherwise. My brother is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the one my parents pointed to when they wanted to make a point about success. He got into engineering at Western, graduated, got a job in project management, married someone my mother described as exactly the kind of woman you should aspire to be. His wife, my sister-in-law, had a way of looking at me that I can only describe as tolerant. Like I was a houseplant she hadn't killed yet, but wasn't particularly invested in keeping alive. I had always been the other one. The one who took longer to figure things out. I'd done 2 years of college, switched programs, worked a string of jobs that sounded fine on paper, but never quite added up to anything my family recognized as a career. At 28, I was working as a vet tech in a clinic in Guelph, raising a basement apartment with 2 roommates, and trying, genuinely trying, to feel okay about all of it. My mother called me sensitive, the way other people say difficult. She meant the same thing. The road trip had been my brother's idea. He'd called in September to say that our grandmother, my dad's mother, who lived outside of Sudbury in a house that smelled like cedar and old wool blankets, had been having a harder time lately, turning 83 in October. He thought we should all go up together. Drive together, make a weekend of it. He said it like he was being generous. I said yes because I missed my grandmother. And because, I'll admit it, part of me still wanted to believe that we could be the kind of family who took road trips together, and it went fine. We left Friday after work. My brother drove. His wife sat in the passenger seat controlling the music. My mother and I were in the back. My dad hadn't come. His back had been bad since August and the drive was too long. It was just the 4 of us. 4.5 hours up the 400, then the 69, then cutting east. My grandmother made dinner. My brother told stories that everyone laughed at. My sister-in-law photographed the meal for some reason I didn't ask about. My grandmother held my hand at the table and asked me, quietly, if I was eating enough. I slept in my grandmother's spare room under a quilt she'd made herself and felt, for the first time in months, genuinely okay. Sunday was when it fell apart. We were heading home. An hour south of Sudbury, my brother pulled off at a rest stop. One of those mid-highway ones. A low brick building with bathrooms and a couple of vending machines, picnic tables bolted to a concrete pad, a parking lot with faded yellow lines. He said he needed to stretch. I got out. My mother got out. My sister-in-law stayed in the van, which I didn't think twice about because she often stayed in the car. My mother asked for my phone while I was standing by the picnic tables. I unlocked it and handed it over. She walked back toward the van. I should have paid attention to the fact that she walked toward the van, not away from it. But I was watching a crow on the edge of the lot, doing that thing crows do, where they tilt their head at you like they're deciding something. By the time I looked back, the van was moving. I remember thinking it was a pull forward, that my brother was just repositioning, finding a better spot. Then I saw the turn signal. Then the van was at the exit. Then it was gone. I stood there for, I don't know, 30 seconds? A minute? Long enough for the cold to fully register. Long enough to hear my brother laughing. Long enough to hear the $20 bet. Then there was just the wind and the crow, and the sound of a transport truck doing 120 on the highway 40 meters away. The rest stop bathroom was the warmest place available, so that's where I went first. I stood in front of the hand dryer and tried to think. No phone, no wallet. I was wearing jeans, my old hoodie from the Guelph Griffons, and a canvas jacket that was fine for October in a city, but not for standing outside in the shield. I had 43 cents. I had my grandmother's phone number memorized because she still had a landline and I used to call it as a kid, and some things stick. The vending machine in the lobby ate my coins and gave me nothing. I pushed the coin return 3 times. Nothing. There was a family just leaving. A man herding 2 kids toward a minivan. A woman ahead of him with a coffee. I opened my mouth. I couldn't make the words come out. I don't know why. Pride, maybe. Or shock. I still hadn't fully processed the fact that my own mother had just driven away on purpose. I went back outside and sat at one of the picnic tables. The concrete was cold through my jeans. I tried to think practically. The rest stop attendant. There was a woman in a Parks Ontario vest doing rounds with a garbage bag. I could ask her to use a phone. That was the obvious answer. I don't know why it took me 10 minutes to get there. I think I kept expecting the van to come back. I kept thinking, they're not actually doing this. This isn't real. Any second the van comes back, and my brother says gotcha, and I'm furious, but it's over. The van didn't come back. I walked over to the woman with the garbage bag. Her name tag said Marguerite. She had the kind of face that's been outside in Canadian weather for 30 years. Weathered and entirely calm. Excuse me, I said. I'm sorry to bother you. My family drove away without me. I don't have my phone. Is there any chance I could use yours to make one call? She looked at me for a second. Just 1 second. But it was a reading kind of look. She was deciding whether I was telling the truth. Then she pulled her phone out of her vest pocket and handed it to me without a word. I called my grandmother. She picked up on the second ring. When I told her what happened, there was a silence on the line, the particular silence of someone who is very angry and is choosing, very carefully, not to say the first thing that comes to mind. Stay where you are, she said. Stay in the light, inside if you can. Don't talk to anyone you don't have to. I'm calling your cousin. My cousin, it turned out, was 4 hours away in Ottawa. He was the only family member with a car who wasn't already on the highway home. Marguerite let me sit in the small staff room at the back of the building. She didn't make a fuss about it. She brought me a coffee from her own thermos. It was milky and sweet and the best thing I'd tasted all day, and told me she'd be around if I needed anything. She didn't ask me questions. She didn't tell me how terrible it was or press me to explain. She just let me sit. I want to remember that. The specific kindness of not being pushed to perform your own distress. While I waited, I had a lot of time to think, which is maybe the wrong way to describe it. It was less thinking, and more a slow accumulation of realizing. My brother had planned this. That was the first thing. This wasn't an impulse. You don't take someone's phone and drive away in a coordinated enough way to also have a bet going unless you talked about it ahead of time. My sister-in-law had $20 ready. My mother had positioned herself by the van. This was choreographed. The second thing, my mother had taken my phone, not borrowed it, taken it, so that I couldn't call anyone immediately, so the joke had a longer runway. The third thing, which was the one that sat in my stomach like a stone, this was not the first time, not this exact thing, but the shape of it. The shape of my family finding my vulnerability, my trust, my tendency to believe people, and using it as the punchline. My brother had done it at Christmas when I was 19, telling me we were doing a Secret Santa with a $50 limit, and then laughing when I showed up with a gift, and realized no one else had bought one. My mother had done it in smaller ways, quieter ways, for as long as I could remember. The way she'd tell a story about me at family dinners that was framed as affectionate, but always ended with everyone laughing at something I genuinely believed or genuinely felt. My sensitivity as the setup. My trust as the punchline. Standing alone on a highway rest stop in October with 43 cents and borrowed coffee, I finally understood that this had never been harmless. The woman from the family with the 2 kids, Masidkin. She'd forgotten something. She saw me sitting there and something in my face must have said enough because she stopped. Are you all right? I told her a shortened version. She didn't say much. She found a 20 in her wallet and put it on the table in front of me. When I tried to refuse, she shook her head. There's a diner about 12 kilometers south, she said. If you can get a ride, you can get warm and eat something. Keep it. I still have the 20 in my mind, not as money, but as evidence. Evidence that a stranger, a complete stranger with 2 kids to wrangle and her own Sunday to get back to, looked at me and decided I was worth $20 of consideration. That's not a small thing. I thought about it a lot in the hours that followed. The next person to come into the building was an older man, maybe early 70s, who was pulling a small trailer. He was heading south, he said, down to Barrie. The diner the woman had mentioned was right on his way. He had one of those faces that's just fundamentally unthreatening. Deep crow's feet from smiling, a Toronto Maple Leafs toque that had been washed too many times, He said I was welcome to a ride to the diner, no problem at all, and he'd radio his wife from the road to let her know he'd be a few minutes late. He had a CB radio. In 2026, I found that incredibly comforting for reasons I'm not sure I can explain. The diner was called something with pine in the name. Pine something, or something pine. And it was exactly the kind of place you picture when you imagine a highway diner. Wood paneling, vinyl booths, a counter with swivel stools, a laminated menu with a maple leaf in the corner. It smelled like coffee and bacon grease and something sweet, probably pie. The woman at the counter was maybe 50, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and the efficient warmth of someone who has been taking care of strangers for decades. I slid into a booth by the window. I had $20. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a grilled cheese and a coffee, and I put my hands around the mug when it came, and I let myself, for just a minute, feel the full weight of what had happened. My family had abandoned me on a highway. On purpose. For a laugh. I was 28 years old, and this was apparently still something they felt entitled to do. My cousin arrived at the diner at 7:15. He'd driven 4 hours. He walked in wearing a hoodie and running shoes like he'd left the second I called, which my grandmother later confirmed he had. He looked at me across the diner, the same way Marguerite had decided what to say versus what not to say. He sat down across from me and ordered a coffee. "You okay?" he said. "Yeah," I said. "You're not?" "No," I said, "not really." He didn't push past that. He ate the rest of my grilled cheese because I'd barely touched it, and we sat there while the diner filled up a little with the Sunday evening crowd, and he told me about a terrible film he'd seen the week before, and why the third act was structurally indefensible. We did not discuss my family for the rest of the drive home. That was the right call. I didn't have the words for it yet. By the time we reached my apartment in Guelph, it was almost midnight. My roommate's lights were off. I let myself in and sat in the kitchen with the lights on low and looked at the wall for a while. My phone had been left in my mailbox. My mother had apparently stopped there on the way home. Guelph was on the route from the highway and dropped it through the slot. No note. Just the phone, screen intact, 17 missed calls from various family members and several texts along the lines of, "It was just a prank, and you're so sensitive and we knew you'd be fine." I read them once. Then I put the phone face down on the table. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. I didn't feel angry the way anger is supposed to feel. Hot and urgent and wanting to do something. I felt the opposite. I felt a kind of settling, like something that had been slightly out of place for a very long time had finally clicked into its correct position. Clear and cold and final. I had been telling myself a story about my family for 28 years. The story went, "They're not perfect, but they love you in their way, and that means something." The story was wrong. I had enough evidence now. 53 kilometers of evidence, a borrowed thermos of coffee, a stranger's $20, and a 4-hour drive from a cousin who didn't have to show up. I knew what I needed to do. It just took me a few weeks to do it. In November, I started seeing a therapist through my work's employee assistance plan. In December, I sent my brother and my mother each a message. Not long, not dramatic, just clear, telling them that I was taking space and wouldn't be in contact. My brother replied with a paragraph about how I'd always been dramatic. I didn't respond. My mother called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. I haven't listened to the messages. My grandmother knows what happened. She called me herself, a week after the rest stopped, and we talked for an hour and a half. She didn't defend anyone. She said, simply, "Some people don't change, and you can't make them." Then she told me about the first winter she spent in Canada after immigrating from Trinidad, and how a neighbor she barely knew had shown up with a pot of soup and a bag of firewood. "I never forgot her," she said. "Some things you keep." I wrote that down after we hung up. I still work at the clinic in Guelph. I moved into a better apartment in the spring. Just me and one roommate, a woman named something I won't tell you, who leaves tea on the counter when she knows I've had a hard day. I joined a hiking group through the rec center, which is something I never would have done before, because before I was always waiting for my family to want to do things like that with me. It turns out other people will just do things with you. You just have to show up. I think about Marguerite sometimes, about the man with the CB radio, about the woman with the 2 kids who gave me $20 without being asked. I think about how the worst day of my adult life was also the day I was treated with more basic human decency by strangers than I had been by my own family in years. That's not a tragedy. Or maybe it is, but it's also information. It tells you something about where to put your trust. It tells you something about who the people in your life actually are, not who you've been hoping they might become. The van turned the corner and they were gone. I stood there in the cold and I counted 43 cents and I had no idea what was coming next. But I made it back, not to them. I want to be clear about that. I made it back to myself. That turned out to be the better destination anyway.